much for that applause before I even said anything. Well, this is an honor. It's a privilege to be able to come up here and tell you how the Lord used, back then, it was Brooks Bible Institute. These people started in the 2020s. I started in 1973 is when I started my education at Brooks. It was a different school back then. It has improved so much under President Thurman, and I'm so thankful for the way the Lord is using him and the staff to just grow this ministry, not just here in St. Louis, but boy, you're going to hear all around the world. It's amazing. When I think of my time at Brooks, I was saved in December of 1971. In January of 1973, that's 1 year and 1 month, I was enrolled at Brooks. I didn't realize it was way too soon for me with the little background I had. Growing up in a Jewish home, I was 110% biblically illiterate. I knew nothing about the Bible. I didn't know anything about the Old Testament, and I certainly didn't know anything about the New Testament. I was overwhelmed. Just hearing hour after hour, day after day, all of this information, it was overwhelming, but I loved it. And I could remember some really, really, really significant things that I learned at my time at Brooks. I learned quickly not to use the word luck. You don't use the word luck or lucky. I had an eraser thrown at me, and I thought, well, what's wrong with that word? I did not understand the sovereignty of God and his providence, and so they said, no, we don't believe in luck. So I erased that word from my vocabulary. But no, I'll tell you what, back then it was a 96 credit hours to get a certificate, 3 years. And out of those 96 credit hours, I would imagine probably 80 of them were nothing but straight up Bible theology, doctrine, just getting into every aspect of theology. And then they would take certain books and we would go through them in fine detail. But we would survey the entire Bible over those 3 years. It was wonderful. I just can't even believe the things that the Lord helped me to understand and learn. Brooks laid a tremendous foundation for me. And foundations are important. I mean, foundations are absolutely necessary. We live in Creve Coeur, and they've been working on a project, I would say probably well over a year. You know how far they've gotten? You can't even see anything above ground yet. Seriously, they're still working on the foundation. That's how important a foundation is. And I got a tremendous foundation at Brooks. And I've built upon that foundation for the last 50 plus years. It's been just tremendous. One of the teachers said to all of the students, you need to start building a library. I didn't know anything about a library. I actually never read a book through until I got saved. Because I had a very difficult time reading. But when I started reading the Bible, when I started reading books about the Bible, I just had this interest. And it was just like a 180. And I mentioned this to my predecessor. I'm with the Midwest Messianic Center, and Emil Elby was the director before me. And I told Mr. Elby, they told me down at Brooks, I need to start a library. And I didn't know what to do. He goes, well, I'll order some books for you, and you just reimburse me. And the first set of books he got me was an 8-volume of systematic theology. And I couldn't pronounce those words. Pneuma what? What are you, soteri what? Harma what? I didn't even know how to pronounce those words. That was a little advanced for me. But I'm thankful to say that as a result of going through my time at Brooks, I was able to work through some of those volumes. and then learn the kind of books to read and some of the books not to read. They really helped us with understanding the importance of discernment. And especially in our day, we need that tremendously. But I'm just really excited. A lot of things are offered now at Brooks that wasn't offered when I was there. And I'm just excited again to see how the Lord is using the school. I will encourage anybody to come down to Brooks. I have encouraged many people to think about it. And now with the online opportunities, of course we didn't have that back then. We had to drive down from West County all the way downtown, Grand Avenue, 4 days a week, and we did it and loved it and are so thankful that the Lord raised up this school and is continuing to use the school for his glory. So if any of you have any ideas, if you want to learn the Bible, and I mean really, really dig into it, dispensational, they take the Bible literally, face value and so forth, it would be a wonderful thing for you to be able to do. It would help you if you're a Sunday school teacher, if you're a pastor, if you want to be a missionary. It'll help you in many, many ways. Well, I could go on and on and on, but we have other things, and I want to hear Steve Green. So I'm not going to take any more time, but thank you very much.
I know, this guy again. In case you missed it or didn't know, that was Marty Zeid, the director of the Midwest Messianic Center, and his alumni here at the school. My place here at Brooks is that I oversee enrollment and the fundraising for the school. This fall, we launched our first graduate program. It was a master's degree in biblical counseling, and I, this evening, just have the opportunity, the pleasure to share some of the stories that I, as the one who gets to stand at the door, so to speak, and welcoming students in. This program has been unique in that the primary student audience hasn't actually been here in the States. It's been primarily across Africa and Europe. If you've known Brooks for very long, you've heard us talk about how accessible we are, that because we have partnerships with like-minded churches and individuals, we're able to offer such a high-quality education, biblical education, in a way that's accessible. This is a core commitment of our school, and to those who are a part of this graduate program, it's providing an opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise. Because of this as a school, we're more accessible to these people across Africa and Europe who otherwise just wouldn't have an opportunity like this likely. In this semester alone, we've had students from South Africa, from Sudan, Rwanda, Uganda, Zambia, Namibia, and the Netherlands. These are some of the stories that I've heard. There's one guy who, after being saved, he was just burdened with a sense of calling to be a missionary in his country. Since then, he's been pursuing theological education to be well equipped for that task, and he's being trained at Brooks. There was one lady who told me that in her just darkest and most difficult days, there was no mature, believing woman that she could go to and that could offer her biblical counsel about her circumstances. And she's taken it upon herself to make sure that that's not an excuse in her area anymore, that she wants to be equipped to be able to help those women that are in her area, and she's being trained at Brooks. Some of these students are part of healthy churches in their respective countries with a desire to equip and to counsel and to disciple those in their churches, and they're being trained at Brooks. Some of these students want to see the work of biblical counseling grow in their countries. They have a burden for discipleship and want to see churches in their contexts be equipped to do this work, and they're being trained at Brooks. Some of these students are just painfully aware of the lack of counseling resources in their context. Counseling resources that tackle the specific issues that people in their area face. And they want to be trained to be the ones who can write those resources, that can produce those resources. And they're being equipped here. Some of these people are from contexts where families are just torn apart, where many women in the area are abused. Evil has a very potent presence. And they want to be able to be equipped to be armed with Scripture, to go into these just head on with a heart of compassion and one that is filled with the Word of God to minister to these people. And they're being trained at Brooks. I could go on, but time doesn't allow me to tell you all the stories that I know. God is doing some really neat things here, especially through this program. There are so many neat stories that I get to hear. And for those of you that I know love and care about and support the school, I want to remind you that you're part of that story. You get to be part of that story of how God, through Brooks, through the ministry of his word, through the training that's happening here, we're equipping international missionaries around the world. We're equipping people to do the work of counseling and discipleship all over Africa and in Europe. I can just stand back as someone who gets to play a small piece in all of this and say, what an honor it is to serve Christ in this way. What a privilege it is to share in the work that he's doing here, and that he's doing through Brooks. I pray that he's pleased to continue to use us. I pray that he's pleased to continue to use you. I'm so thankful that you all are here tonight. That there are so many things. We met and discussed several times, what are we going to talk about tonight? Because there's so much we could say. There's so much we could tell you, and just time does not permit us to be able to do so. So I can't tell you how thankful I am that you're here. May God bless you all. Thank you all.
I'm Brian Rickett, the Dean of the Distance Education Program, and I typically teach biblical languages. The opening verses of Psalm 19 in Hebrew sound like this. Lamnat Zeach mizmor leDavid, Hashemayim separim kibodeo, Ume'se yadao magid harakia, Yom le-yom yabia omer, Welayla le-layla Yahweh Da'at. We just returned from East Asia 3 weeks ago. And while we were there, we spoke, I think, to over 500 students at over maybe a dozen speaking engagements. They started at the All Asian Creation Conference in Singapore, and then it went to a church in Singapore and another church in Singapore, and then we went to Tokyo after 2 weeks. All of that happened as a result of connections that we've made through our distance education program with men in those places. So back in 2021, I think it was, right around the time when COVID locked everything down, we began offering courses online. And pretty soon after that, students from different places in the world began dialing into our courses. One of those guys is a man who has a PhD in ecology, and he's a retired chemist who specialized in developing products, chemicals, for weed control. Well, he became a believer at some point in his life, and as he was nearing retirement, he wanted to enhance his understanding of Genesis. So he enrolled in our Hebrew program because he really wanted to understand the nature of the curse and the weeds that came out of Genesis 3. And so he took a course, and then he took another course, and then another course. And in May, he'll graduate at 69 or 70 years old with a certificate an advanced certificate in biblical languages. He will have taken a full program of Hebrew, a full program of Aramaic, and he wants to continue studying. Well, after these years, he and another student, a guy from Japan, decided that they needed to bring Brooks there in person. And so they began to strategize a way to sort of get us there. And this All-Asian Creation Conference was being held in Singapore. And there were some 20 or so scientists, mostly scientists, coming in from all over Southeast Asia, including Australia, New Zealand, and other places. And only a couple of people were speaking in areas of biblical studies. So they brought me there to speak on the literary genius of Genesis chapter 1. And so I spoke on that, and I was really impressed with the high quality of people that were participating. We met one lady from New Zealand who was 42, who flew there with her 10-year-old nephew so he could attend the All-Asian Creation Conference. And most of these sessions were above my head because they dealt with science. But that was the nature of that environment. And then I spoke at another place where they were doing discipleship training, and they had a number of people who had been saved in restricted countries in Asia and Africa. And because of their conversion experience, they were sort of driven out of their villages, and they needed a place to go and be discipled and to be strengthened with the goal of going back. So we got to speak to them and meet them. And all in all, it was a really packed 3 weeks. Now that is a direct result of the way that the Brooks Distance Education Program is both importing people into our country, into our institution, and now, for the first time that I know of, has physically placed us in those places. So we had a wonderful time with those brothers and sisters. We met a lot of high-quality Christians. We learned about the difficulties that Christians in those countries are experiencing. We had a couple of sessions. One was sort of a backroom session where we met representatives from the major East Asian countries, all the ones that you might think of, who gave reports on the political environment where they were. And so we learned about what things look like behind closed doors in China, how many Christians there actually are, what they are doing, the nature of their ministries and discipleship. We learned about what's happening in Australia. We learned that it's impossible to be a professor at a university in Australia and be a Christian. And we met a guy who was saved 16 years ago. He had been an atheist. I forget his particular field. It seemed like maybe it was physics or something like that. He was a research professor, and he's well into his 70s now. And he began, through his research, coming to understand that there has to be a mind and a designer behind everything. And as he began thinking about this, he began to confide in a colleague who was a chemist, who was an atheist. And she says, "There's no God." And she says, "I can prove it." And he said, "How?" And so they decided, the two of them, to go to church on Sunday. While there, they both got saved. And so then they get back to their institution, and he's a well-respected research professor, and word began to get out that they had both become Christians. Well, they got married. But the result was they were both pushed out of their universities. Well, there were a lot of people that were at the conferences who were utilizing pseudonyms because they couldn't utilize their actual name because of reprisal from their institution or from their companies. Well, that's a whole different area of the world where people have very different experiences than we do. And when we started the distance education program, it really wasn't bringing students here. But now, in God's providence, he's sending us there. And we're getting to see how the Lord is working in different ways. And we all pray together, we worship together, and they tell me that they're actually going to have us back. And so we'll see how that goes. But that's another maybe unexpected way that the Lord is advancing his kingdom work through this institution.